We got quite a few folks already joined in. Okay, let's get going. Okay. Badram Karanebhihi Shruniyama Devaha Badram Pashyema Akshabhihi Ryajatraha Sthirairangair Tushtuvam Sastanubihi Vyashema Devahitai Yadayuhu Swasti Nah Indro Vridrashravah Swasti Nah Pusha Vishwavedah Swasti Nah Tarksho Arishtanemihi Swasti No Bruhaspatir Dadatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to this Sunday program again. And as you know, we have been doing Manduka Upanishad for about a month. The first 3 weeks, we were looking at the scriptural evidence and description of the Omkara Tattva, what it signifies. Last week, we had a very interactive session looking at the scientific implications of Om, vibrations, physics, consciousness. So that was a very interactive session that went on for about 2 hours. So today we have a fantastic program by an expert, Dr. Sunder Iyer. So what I was going to do today is just to give you a brief overview of how the program is going to run today. So Harish from New Jersey is going to introduce our expert speaker today, Dr. Iyer from Ohio. And then at the end of Dr. Iyer's presentation, I will make a Q&A. I'll coordinate a Q&A. So what I would strongly encourage all of us to do is just put in your questions in the chat forum and I'll make a note of those and I'll ask Dr. Iyer any pressing questions that we might have. And then Ajit will finish it off with a vote of thanks. Okay, so thank you very much. And Dr. Iyer, we are really blessed to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to pass on to Harish to start off the event. Harish, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Madhuji, and welcome to all our friends and family of Sahiti for this program. As Madhuji just called out, we are really excited to welcome Sunder Iyer for this program. And it's my honor to introduce Sunder Iyer to our gathering today. So I'll first start with my own personal experience. So I first stumbled upon Sundar's videos a few years ago. And he has since been a source of inspiration for me and for my wife, Madhvi, on his insights on yoga, on philosophy. We were really hooked to his series on Hanuman Chalisa that he did sometime last year and on Devi. And he has some amazing travelogues, to pilgrimage sites in the Himalayas that we've followed, quite diligently. And again, he has close to 4 million subscribers on his channel. He's a bit of a celebrity. He's very humble, but he's a bit of a celebrity, in our circles. So, and I've also had the opportunity to join a couple of his workshops when he's been in New Jersey. And a little bit more about his background is that he's been practicing the science of yoga for a very long time, since since the age of 10. He spent a number of years at the ashram of Sri Satya Sai Baba. He's had the opportunity to learn philosophy of yoga directly from him, and he's been blessed to learn from a lot of other yoga masters as well. He has earned his PhD in banking and finance, but he's always continued to learn traditional yogic practices and on philosophy. He studied ancient, Sanskrit texts from over the years. And the one thing that I'll also mention is that I know this group has a lot of eminent doctors here as well, and you'll find it interesting that Dr. Sunder Iyer is also an MD in alternative medicine. Now he's dedicated his life to this to spreading the message of yoga on wellness, and he has many workshops and retreats. So I encourage you to follow his this journey. Again, very fortunate to have you, Sunder, and I'll hand it over to you to walk us through this. Thank you.
Namaskar, everyone. Thank you, Harish, for that wonderful introduction. When you hear nice things about you, you don't want somebody to stop. So I have to admit that I was a little disappointed you stopped a little short of what I wanted. I'm kidding. Madhusudanji, I've heard such wonderful things about you from Harish. I've not had the chance to attend this forum before, but from the introductory chant that you did, the Vedic chant, um, with such splendid pronunciation and clarity, speaks volumes of your dedication and your knowledge. So thank you all for giving me this opportunity to be part of this gathering, to participate in this forum, and a chance to offer my perspectives. I feel very humbled to be here. Let me at the very outset put out this disclaimer, because today we live in the world of disclaimers, otherwise we are in trouble, right? So the disclaimer is, I am not a Sanskrit scholar. I am not an expert in Vedanta or Vedas. All of this is my greatest passion. I consider myself a student, and I will forever be a student in this path of yoga, of Vedanta, of spirituality. To me, self-realization is not a static goal to be achieved, because the self itself is infinite. And the more I discover this infinite nature of the self, the more I learn that there is so much more yet to discover, to experience. And that journey will continue forever. And in that journey lies, to me, the meaning of self-realization. So just self-realization is not static. Neither it is dynamic. It's both the Shiva aspect and the Shakti aspect, if you will. Having spent my entire youth in the ashram with my Sadguru Bhagwan, Sri Satya Sai Baba, I have learned to pay a lot of emphasis on the practicality of spirituality and experiencing what Vedanta teaches us. And that is why I have this passion of getting into yoga, practicing yoga. To me, Vedanta is the philosophical background against which the practice of yoga is done. Whether it is Hatha Yoga, where you use your body, breath, and mind, whether it is Raja Yoga, whether you take that step from Hatha Yoga into deep meditation, all of this is practiced in the background of this Vedantic concepts of Prajnanam Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, Ekoham Bhaushyam. And that's why my Gurukulam is called Kaivalya. Kaivalya is that Kevala, experience of that oneness, that there is only one consciousness of which you and I are all part of. To me, that concept is more than an intellectual comprehension. It's more than an emotional experience of a high. It opens doors to deep spirituality. And in layman's term, it comes back to me as the greatest form of self-empowerment, self-confidence, self-actualization, and so on. And therefore, when I begin to operate from that knowledge, knowing that I have access to this bank of unending capacity, which is unending in its capacity to give, then I can draw from it whatever I want, whatever it is that I need at that moment. And that enriches my life. It is that passion that has guided me to give up my job and everything. And I devote myself now entirely. At the age of 60, I think it's high time I do something valuable with my life, especially after having lived with a very, very divine master, such as Sri Satya Sai Baba. So today's topic, and I'm also very aware that I am in the presence of learned scholars, students of Vedanta, and you perhaps know a lot more about the Upanishads than I do. And so allow me to present my perspectives with humility. I want to focus on how I perceive this concept of Om. Harish did give me a background saying that you have recently studied or currently studying the Mandukya Upanishad, which is a short Upanishad, but perhaps the most profound among all Upanishads because it talks about the Om. right in the beginning of that Upanishad, everything is explained there, right? It's self-explanatory about Om being everything, idam sarvam, at one akshara, that akshara which is Brahman, which is Om, is everything. It is the past, the present, the future, all of this, everything that we see and understand and experience in this dimension that you and I relate to, the dimension of the senses, all of that is a reflection, a reaction, and a resound of this one vibratory principle from which everything um, is projected, I would say. So here is what I want to do today, is I want to give you how I perceive this Om, how I've learned it and practiced it for the last 45 years or so, because I went to Baba's ashram when I was a teenager, and we began our day every morning, and I stayed there for over 15 years. We began every morning with chanting the 21 Oms. And that to me was an eye opener. And that was one of the best experiences, because among all the yogas, Nada yoga is the highest yoga. You have various forms of traditional yoga, right? The Hatha yoga, the Raja yoga, and so on. And of course, different paths as explained in the Gita, Bhakti yoga, and all of that. But Nada yoga, the yoga of sound, is the highest, because it is believed from that Akasha, the principle of sound, everything emerges from there. Our thought, every object that you see around you, for example, in your own home right now, the chair that you're sitting on, the table that is in front of you, a laptop or an iPad that's on your lap, all of that was a thought in somebody's head, perhaps your head, before you went to Amazon and brought it and purchased it. But before that, it was in the thought, as a thought in Steve Jobs' mind, right? And that thought was a vibration, a sound that manifested itself into an iPad or an MP3 file today, which you and I experience. So everything owes its origin to that sound. And therefore, sound, the way we can relate to vibration is through sound, through frequencies. And so that sound becomes the highest form of yoga. When we meditate on the sound, we purify the innermost parts of the chitta, which we generally, colloquially speaking, we say the mind. But it is that chitta which holds all the concept of the past and the future and all the vasanas and samskaras that we have ascribed or accumulated. All of that, if we need to drill through them and hit a reset button, to me, Om is the reset button that you hit. Because Om is like, to me, in practice, it becomes like a drilling machine. It drills into the subconscious, unconscious, clears all the ideas that confine us to set patterns of thinking that we become addicted to. And then we project a reality based on those addictive patterns of thinking. But Vedanta helps us break that in a theoretical fashion. But when we take that Vedanta and bring it into sadhana, in other words, into practice, then Om is one of the finest form of practice, because in that Om, we begin to create that vibration that helps us go back to that very beginning of the universe. It's kind of going back to the blackboard, as it were, going back to A for apple and B for bat, if you will, going back to the blackboard. So Om is that, to me, that powerful. It has helped me rewire my mind, if you will, to a large extent. And it continues, right? Like I said initially, the path to self-realization is the ability to continually rewire yourself, continually expand, unconditionally expand, without any dogma or doctrines to bind you, and yet embracing all dogma or doctrines as part of that, because it all comes from that one source, the Om. So allow me to share the Om in form of some slides here, the way I understand the Om, and how, to me, the chanting of the Om brings out the essence of the Mandukya Upanishad. Now you see in front of you the Om. Let's see if I can highlight my screen. Okay, there you go. So see myself more clearly. All right. So we have the Om here, and the body language of the Om itself is very powerful. No alphabet or letter, as we understand it, has been designed by accident in Sanskrit. There was all a very deep purpose and an understanding. Every single letter has a vibrational pattern, not only in the matter of sound, predominantly it's sound, and then when you visualize it, it was also written eventually at some point. And even that writing has body language to it. So in yoga, we believe that every petal, there are total 50 petals in the 6 chakras, and the 50 petals correspond to the 50 letters of Sanskrit. So here, Om has a very powerful body language to me, and it has helped me in my meditation. I want to offer that perspective to you. If you see the bottom part of the Om, it's like a number 3, right? The bottom part to me represents, and I've just darkened this so that the words that I project is more clearer, represents the Jagrat Avastha. The Jagrat Avastha, as you probably know, all of you know, I don't want to explain that, go into detail, because that'll be like preaching to the choir, but the awakened state. So I'm hoping we are all awake right now and listening. And so our senses are interacting with everything around us, creating this virtual reality that we call the mind, and therefore a virtual cloud, if you will. And then in that mind, all these things is happening, right? And so that is in the Jagrat Avastha, the awakened state. To me, the bottom part of it represents. And why bottom, why not the top? I'll explain that in a bit, bear with me. That is the Jagrat Avastha, the awakened state, where we define a set of reality. Then you have exactly opposite to that. The body language is, one is wide awake. What is opposite to wide awake? Fast asleep. So I've just called it asleep here. Deep sleep, fast asleep, sushupti. That is the next state, exactly opposite to that which is awakened. So these are the 2 states of extremities. Either you're fully awake or you're fast asleep. But then in between these 2 states is one state which is connected to these and yet not fully part of it. It extends that. It's kind of a mix between between wide awake and deep sleep. What is that? That is the swapna. So the tail that emerges from these 2 states is like another consciousness that emerges from here, is that swapna dream state, in between the awakened state and the deep sleep state. Now, for most of us, we run our lives in these 3 states. We are either happy, unhappy, whatever it is, right? We wake up in the morning, and then there is we kind of go through what dreams we had, and then we spend the whole day, and then we come back in the night and once again go into a dream world, and then go into sleep, and so on. And so the self is somehow caught up in this 3. If you notice the body language of Om, these 3 are connected to each other. If I had a car, I could drive literally down from Jagrat to Swapna, come back and go into sleep, come back into awakened state. It's all connected, interconnected. It's not there's no matter of faith or a leap of consciousness or nothing. It's all connected. So most of us in this group, I'm sure, in fact, all of us should be able to relate to these 3 states. But then comes in the Om, there is a crescent, which is unconnected to these 3 states. There is no connection to that. That crescent represents the state of transcendence. The mind, again, these are just matter of perspectives, right? The mind relates to these 3 states. Let me remove that for a second. The mind that you and I, as we understand this, the senses and all of that relate to these 3 states: the awakened state, the dream state, and the sleep state. All of this In fact, in the sleep state, the mind doesn't exist, senses doesn't exist. We only infer, right? If you, as students of Vedanta, you know, there's um, uh, pratyaksha pramana, anumana pramana. You just infer that you slept well, because in sleep, you don't know that. You wake up and say, I slept well. Why? Because I didn't sleep. I didn't dream. I wasn't awake. So I'm inferring that I slept well. The I didn't exist. So the mind either fully is existing or lack of existence. In these three states, there is a relation to mind. Either it's fully awake or the mind is fully non-existent. But the mind has no connection with the transcendent state. So then how does one experience the state of transcendence? And to me, that is explained in Adi Shankara's sloka. I'm not getting into that sloka. It's one of the most beautiful slokas. I chant it every morning. Pratas smarami, hridi samspurada atma tattvam, satchit sukam, paramahamsa gatim turiyam. So the beauty of Adi Shankara, he's given us a hint there that the mind cannot take you to Turiya. It is a Paramahamsa that takes you there, because he's used the word manas later on as well. Anyway, the point here is that there is another energy that takes you into Turiya. To me, this is how I understand the Om. The crescent is where the self sits and observes the other three. What are the other three? The awakened state, the deep sleep state, and the swapna state. There is a self that watches. You are merely a witness. The self is merely the witness. Is that self the Brahman? No. There is the dot, the bindu, where everything merges into that oneness. That is a state of, in Raja Yoga, Patanjali says, Tada drishtu swarupe avasthanam. The Purusha goes back to his state. And that Turiya Atita, in the Siddha Siddhanta documents, they call that the Turiya Atita. They don't define what it is. They say beyond Turiya, there is that state. There is no I to experience that state, right? So that is where even Shiva is lost in himself. Nidhana pataye namaha, nidhana pathantikaya namaha. So in Shivopasana, you say he is the one who is the Lord of dissolution, and he dissolves himself also. So that state is beyond transcendence. So the less we speak about that, the better. Because that is, it can't be spoken about. Turiya, transcendence. So to me, Omkara represents these three states: the awakened state, the dream state, the deep sleep state, and the Turiya Avastha. Now, how does that translate itself into a chant? Now, this is okay from a theoretical aspect, right? We can understand it, we can look at it, but how does that translate itself in the sounds? Again, you perhaps have explored this already, but bear with me. Allow me to explain. That is why there are three aksharas that form the Om. The three aksharas indicating these three states. The Akara. Akara is the awakened state. Ukara, the dream state. Makara, deep sleep. Why Makara is deep sleep? If you remember your mother's lullaby, or if you are a mom here or a parent, you put your child to sleep with a hum. The puts the child to sleep. So Makara is that which takes you into that deep sleep state. Akara, Ukara, and Makara, the three together becomes one akshara. That's the magic of Om. So now I am sure many of you are wondering, okay, so Om is done here. What about the Turiya then? What in Om takes us to the Turiya Avastha? The silence that follows after the Om takes you to the Turiya Avastha. The gap between two Oms is the Turiya Avastha. The gap between two thoughts, the gap between two moments. That gap where the mind rises above duality escapes into the zone of Turiya. So akara, ukara, makara, and the silence that follows is turiya. Or if you're chanting many ohms, the gap in between is the turiya avastha. The turiya atita is that dot absorbs everything into itself. Okay. If you say I experience the dot, then perhaps it's not the experience, because there is no I to experience that. There is no return there, point of return. There's a point of no return. You become the Shiva. So silence is the turiya avastha. Akara, ukara, makara. Now, there seems to be and I was not aware of this till I stepped out of the ashram and in 95. And I began interacting with people, and more so now in this yoga world, that seems to be a trend, if you will, to split the Om and chant it as Aum. I think that is not right, in my opinion. The poetry of Om is the culmination of all these three. If it was meant to be chanted otherwise, it would have been passed down to us by the sages, by the seers, by practitioners, by schools, traditional schools. Because for those of us who come from the Indian background, from India, you know that these cultures exist, these practices and the schools, many of them exist hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. So the Om has come to us from many yugas, but nowhere have they told us to chant Aum like this, like wash my mouth. So the beauty there is the awareness is there. The three aksharas, akara, ukara, and makara together become the Om. So you continue the chanting of the Om is still Om. The awareness is that in this Om lies the three states of consciousness, which is explained in the Mandukya, right? So everything, the Bhuta, Bhavishya, Bhavat and Bhavishya, and all of that is in the Omkara. The three states are in the Omkara. Everything is in that. The three aksharas are also in this Om. So when it comes to chanting, the Om is always chanted Om. I love the sound of that Om. I love the poetry in that chant. And therefore, I like to keep it in that traditional way of chanting the Om and not split it, because I become aware of three aksharas. It's all about bringing together, because Om represents the culmination of everything. It absorbs, begin to absorb all duality unto itself. And consciousness begins to withdraw, absorbing everything into that state of Kaivalya, oneness. And so, and that's when the ends, silence begins. Now, before I go to the aspect of chanting and things like that, I did mention why is it that, let me quickly go back to the other slide, where I said I'll talk to you why that top part of the Om is deep sleep and not the bottom part. Could we not just switch it? Could we not just say I'm talking about the body language here. For those of you who just want to be a nerd like me, to think, why not? Why can't this be there and why can't that be there? So on. So deep sleep, the body language, the closest you and I can experience Turiya is deep sleep. Paramahamsa Yogananda talks about that. In fact, he refers to it in one of his talks as the God state, because deep sleep is where the I stops existing. The closest to Turiya is deep sleep. That's why I like to visualize deep sleep in top, close to Turiya. And the awakened state is the furthest from Turiya. The more we engaged in discussions and speaking about Turiya, the more further we are, because we are there. But then we begin to transcend these three states and go into Turiya and understand what Turiya is. So that was one thing I wanted to make sure, make clear in this visualization, if you will. If you want to meditate on visualizing the Om, to me, the body language of Om means this. All right. Now, there are many methods of chanting the Om. To me, Om is simply you take in a deep breath and you allow the Om to reverberate. you initially begin with from the base of the throat, the Om starts, and then it slowly ends in the lips. So sometime I'm sure you already are studying this. There's 4 types of sounds and so on and so forth. The para, pashyanti, madhyama, vaikari, and all of that. Um, the concept is when you begin the Om, your mind starts from complete awareness, and then it slowly goes into that state, which is actually the source of where it started. We are going back to the source. So the Om starts from an awakened state and it takes you deep into the Turiya. We are going back home, right? It's like in reverse gear. It's time to return home. So Om is not starting from the source and coming out. It's actually starting from here. I can relate to this world. I'm awake. So I start with Akara. And then I go into this dream state where I begin to break barriers of time and space, because in dream, I can be in Timbuktu, I can be in London if I'm dreaming, and I can be there in a couple of seconds and I can come back to Ohio, United States, right? I can do that in dream. Time and space gets confused there. I break the barriers. And then in deep sleep state, in the Makara, everything ceases. The eye is gone to sleep. So, um, so for me, the chanting of Om takes me from the awakened state, going back into the Turyavastha, and then coming back into the next chant. So that cycle is what the self plays. We don't want to escape this world. There is no escaping from this world into some other dimension and looking down upon and saying, this is all illusion, bad and materialistic. I want to be spiritual. All that is our illusions that we have created. The self is completely untouched, the true self, right? Just witnessing. There is a part in you and me, which is the real part. Call that the Shiva consciousness, if you will. I call that the Shiva. The Shiva within is just watching. That is why in the Purana, Shiva is only meditating. He doesn't know anything else. Shakti is the one that creates all of this. So Shiva is just watching. Shiva is unaffected by all of this. So Om reminds us of that state of Shiva consciousness, which is always, again, the word always has a time element. See, we get curtailed by the choice of words. Shiva is eternally watching. That is why it's called Sada Shiva. Sada Shiva, eternally Shiva state. No Shava, Shiva. Where what we call the death, the master calls it the birth. What the caterpillar calls the end, the master calls it the butterfly. Where Shava ends, Shiva begins. That's why Shiva sits on the graveyard. That consciousness is there eternal, untouched by birth and death and all of these other 3 states. Okay. So the Om takes us there. That's why I love the chanting of the Om. It's one of the most powerful ways to take our mind, and practicing it again and again and again becomes a sadhana of the highest kind to me. So let's chant that Om once. I take in a deep breath. And as I chant the Om, I try to delve into the beauty and just simply focusing on the sound vibrations that come out of the throat into the the mouth and then ending at the lips. And I follow that sound out as I leave it out along with the breath. I follow the breath, I follow the sound, and the mind goes into the manas ends and the Raja hums, the swan begins to take over. So kindly listen. one of uh, the benefits, the highest benefit, of course, we know is self-actualization or self-realization or merging into that Om. But one of the byproducts, the incidental benefits that comes by the way, is as you practice the chanting of the Om, never mind the length, okay? The length comes by itself, the ability to expand the Om, because you begin to enjoy that. So the sound just carries, it's like a journey into the sound itself, into the vibrational pattern. It's a journey of the mind. The mind gets arrested like a buzzer sound, if you will, that stops the chatter of the mind, because suddenly it wonders, what is this sound with no meaning coming in? I'm not able to analyze this. I'm not able to logically interpret this. What is this? And so it stops the mind from thinking, opens it to experience. That's one of the benefits. The other benefit, in a physical sense, it actually improves your aerobic capacity of the lungs. Uh, in a very physical sense, because I think it was Harish who, while introducing me, said that you did speak, or it was Madhusudan ji, I don't know, I'm not sure. You said about, you spoke about the scientific benefits of Om and things like that. One of the benefits is most of our toxins are released by exhalation through the breath. More than 70% of our toxins are released not through sweat and tears and urine and feces, but through breath. So the more you're able to exhale, the longer your exhalation is, the more healthy you will be. That's a basic practice in pranayama, and the basic understanding of a healthy yoga practice. Focus on exhalations. Now, along with a long exhalation, if you bring Om, then it becomes very powerful. So at the very least, even the most agnostic among people who want to chant the Om, the benefit is you're basically getting rid of all the toxins. Okay. That is the beauty here. It begins to expand the capacity of the lungs. The more we are able to breathe out, the more you're able to let go. The more you're able to let go, the more the mind becomes more peaceful, and it begins to follow the sound. It's like a puppy that listens to the sound and just begins to follow with no questions asked. So that is the beauty of this Om chant. At the very least, it'll help you develop a great amount of lung capacity. From the ability to speak, sound, as I said earlier, and I'm sure everyone in this group agrees that everything begins and ends in sound, literally. Sound is such an important part of it. In fact, when I watch television, I mute the advertisements because I know at the sublingual level, at some point, they are influencing through certain frequencies of the sound they use. In fact, even this Tanpura that you heard is tuned to a different frequency. I call it that 432 hertz frequency, and sometime we'll discuss that on a completely different note. But there are certain frequencies that helps the mind to very easily slip into meditation. They may be very subtle. The ear cannot make out the difference. The logical mind will not understand it, but there's something within that talks to it, speaks. So one of the benefits I have found personally is your voice becomes very sweet. The tone of your voice, somehow at a very unconscious level, you begin to master the sound that emanates from your mouth. Um, and therefore, you're able to speak, you're able to modulate, if you will, if that's the right word, but at an unconscious level, all of that comes in. And so when you speak, your children listen to you, or your spouse listens to you. um, those are the good benefits, right? The point here is you don't practice it for that, but that kind of knowledge comes in, that is the power of Om. You're able to understand the nuances of sound. You're able to respect the sound, and then you become mindful because of Om chanting. You become mindful of the sound that enters through the ear. That's why, personally, at a personal level, I'm very, very mindful of what kind of sounds enter through my ear as much as I can. So we make choices of what kind of televisions we watch, my wife and I. And I'm especially mindful of the sound that goes out of my mouth. Because in this sound coming in and out, in this vibration, the passage of vibration that I create, the vibrational cloud that I engage in my inner consciousness is what creates the reality around me. Om as that energy to create that reality the way you want it, because your higher self begins to orchestrate it for you. Now, these are the simple incidental benefits that come out of long periods of chanting and meditating on the Om, because in chanting and the Om, you're beginning to tap into an infinite reservoir of knowledge, wisdom, experience of the Shiva consciousness within. I have no doubts about that. Nobody can ever talk me out of that because it's my experience. And all I'm sharing with you is, and honestly, from that experience. So over the years, I practiced many types of Om. So when I sit to chant the Om, how do I do? What do I really focus on? So I call this the Avastha method. The Avastha is the states. So you have the Jagrata Avastha, Swapna Avastha, and Sushupti Avastha. So when I chant 3 Oms, the first Om, even though every Om has 3 states in it, I focus on the first Om, I focus on the awakened state. Where am I right now in this state? And at this moment, where am I? I'm in front of the computer, I'm in front of a camera, I have some lights on me. And all of that, I become very aware as I chant the Om, and acceptance of where I am first, rather than saying, oh, I don't want to think of all this. I want to go into this Om world. I want to escape from this. It doesn't come. The more we resist situations, the more they become real to us, right? So the first Om here is the acceptance of the Jagrata Avastha. This is one part of my consciousness. And therefore, let me accept this, embrace this in the first Om. The second Om, then I go into that state where I begin to dream. When you understand that the ability to dream is, Patanjali talks about in Yoga Sutras, he talks about a method of meditating on your dreams. So there is a methodology there, which psychology is beginning to call it lucid dreaming. They're getting into that frontier, but there is a beauty there. You're actually, you control, you begin to orchestrate something within you, inside you, the way you want. So the ability to do Swapna Avastha is not simply a state which you ate an ice cream, you dreamt you were eating an ice cream and it fell on the road. That is the simplest way of looking at it. But the dream states give you a reflects back to you where you are in your mind. So you're able to go back and reset that. So the second Om focuses on that Swapna state. And the third Om focuses on the Sushupti state. The more subtler we go, the more difficult it is to explain in words. So you begin to experience that. You don't have to logically analyze that. When you begin to chant the Om, say this is for the Sushupti, and you chant, you feel you're fast asleep as you chant the Om. I call this the Avastha method. When I have time to just chant 3 Oms, or I can do in sets of 3s like this. It's very powerful and prepares me for before my yoga practice, for example, because then I take that awareness and begin to practice and understand how consciousness begins to take all these forms and shapes, just like you see in the universe. So you begin to flow from one asana to the other. The other method I do, and I combine this with 2 or 3 methods, is the Pancha Mahabhuta method. We all know perhaps what these Panchamabhuta. Let me put it out here. So you have the earth, the water, the fire, the air, and space. So each Om, allow the Om to merge into what I consider the earth, the physical body, the matter around me, matter itself, right into atoms, molecules, electrons, protons, and so on. I just allow the Om. I see, experience is allowing yourself to feel. Not necessarily, it has to make sense here. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense. For example, romance, or you say, I love something. What does that even mean to the mind? The mind doesn't understand that, right? And so therefore, you can't explain to yourself logically and get your way through this. You have to just allow and open that door to experience. That's what Om does. Om stops the mind, should ideally, when you chant the Om, you stop the mind from thinking. Having learned all that, right? It's like the doctor learning everything in medical school, and then he steps out into the operation theater. Now he just dives and allows his intuition to guide him or her. And it is the same thing with Om. You can do all the reading, studying, all the exchange of ideas and perceptions, and then you sit to meditate. You allow all of that to guide you. So you become one with the earth. You become one with the water element in you, outside you. Know the inner connection between the waters outside and inside. Because you and I are not isolated beings in this universe, right? If one of these elements are in excess, you and I cannot live. That's what's happening with global warming and all of that. Why is it affecting us? Because we are an intricate part of this universe. So the Om begins to expand, that this tree is a part of me, and therefore my consciousness begins to expand. It becomes an experience. The water, the fire, the element, the heat from the sun, the fire, the light that I see reflected through my eyes, all of that. So each Om, I begin to concentrate, I begin to focus, I allow myself to become one with each of the Panch Mahabhutas. In fact, I'm doing a very detailed series of classes called the Kaivalya Marga classes, where I first call this a yogic anatomy. The true yoga anatomy is understanding Prithvi, Apaha, or Jala, Agni or Tejas, Vayu, and Akasha within us. How do they come to us in the form of food that we eat, the color choices we make, in the words that we speak, in the thoughts we entertain? All of them are related to this Panchamahabhutas. So this Om helps us to understand a connection with the Panchamahabhutas. So this is one practice. So you can do 5 Oms or sets of 5 Oms. And then comes for me, I combine this with the chakra method. I have the 6 chakras and the Sahasrara. So 6 plus 1. So in this, I take the Mooladhara, I focus on the Mooladhara as I chant the Om. I connect the Mooladhara and the earth and the sense of smell. I can chant 3 Oms for Mooladhara alone. One for Mooladhara, one for the earth element, one for the sense of smell that connects the earth element and brings the earth element into our experience, right? The sense of smell is what connects, Gandha is what connects to the earth. In other words, when you smell something, it is because there is a matter out there is where that is originate. The smell originates because of matter. Water by itself has no smell. Air by itself has no smell. Fire has no smell. Neither does space, correct? But matter is the only one that has the quality of smell. That's why you come back from a vacation and you smell something, you'll look for something in the house. What a hey, where's that dead rat? I can smell something. So that smell. So smell is associated with the earth element. And thus, each Om, you can focus on each Indriya, each sense organ, understand the connections. And each Om opens your mind to greater understanding. And at a deeper level, it begins to reorchestrate, redefine, reshape the influence of the senses upon us. So similarly in Swadhisthana, Swadhisthana chakra, connected to the water element, connected to the sense of taste, the tongue. And so you begin to understand the connection between Swadhisthana chakra and the tongue element, and so on. In each of these chakras, the Manipuraka, associated with the fire, the digestive fire, aham vaishvanaro bhutva praninam deham ashritaha, Krishna says, right? So I am the digestive fire in all beings. So this fire is associated with the Manipuraka, and that fire represents from below my feet through my eyes. And so I begin in that Om, begin to understand my connection. And through the Om, I connect to these. So these are different types of sadhanas that you can engage in. And then whenever you're ready in a deep state for highest contemplation, then you can go to the avastha state and say, now I'm going to go from the jagrata avastha, or what is a jagrata avastha? What is swapna avastha? What is shushupti avastha? And so on. So there are many ways that you can chant the Om. But if you can, my humble suggestion at the end of this presentation, and I'm almost done, is that try and bring in the chanting of Om on an everyday basis in some form or the other, not necessarily as a dogmatic practice, not necessarily as a religious practice. That is one part. If you're into pujas and bhajans and kirtans and so on, that is one part, right? You chant the Oms and don't say, I have already done my bhajans, I did my 3 Oms. That's different from this. Take the time whenever early morning is perhaps the ideal because your phones don't go off early in the morning, your day is just going to begin and there is really nothing else but just you. And so early morning is perhaps the best time. But some of you or anyone who's working in different shifts or has a long night and so on, you have to figure out where is that time where it is just my space and me. And those are the moments you have to, when I say you have to is simply because I say it because I'm so enthusiastic about this practice. It is so enriching that when you take that time off, and even if it is 3 ohms, mindfully chant each ohm, then it becomes a wonderful sadhana. It becomes a door that opens your mind from mere perception and intellectual comprehension to actual experience. You begin to tune in to a different dimension, if you will, and you begin to feel a presence of your higher self, and no words can describe that experience. It is like going into the sanctum sanctorum of in the cave of your heart and seeing that light. I believe it is that light that inspired Adi Shankara. It is that darshan. That is why it's called darshanam, papanashanam. When you see that, then your mind rises above all this guilt and I am the doer and all of that. Everything rises, everything dissolves. So he says, pratas marami hridi samsfurat atmatattvam. Hridi, in the cave of your heart lies that jewel, the atma. But then how do you experience that? To me, Om is a great sadhana, a great way to bring it into practice, because this can be practiced safely across age groups. It doesn't matter if one is a diabetic or one has high blood pressure and low blood pressure and so on and so forth. Don't worry about the length of the chanting. Chant as long as you can. And then when you begin to experience, then you understand that within that Om, you focus on how steady is my voice, how steady is my breath as it goes out. How can I go into, there's a whole world of things happening inside that. You just have to go in and begin to explore. It's like, these pundits who sing classical music, a kid might say, why is that person going on doing, but then when you learn classical music and go into that, you'll appreciate every nuance, every vibration that emanates from his voice, like Bhimchen Joshi and Pandit Jasraj and so on. These pundits, these scholars have mastered that. It's same thing happening in Om. You might just say it's just one Om. What else is there? But when you begin to meditate, a whole universe literally opens up inside. The vibrational pattern, the frequencies, the sound, the quality of sound in your voice, the ability to breathe through all of that. And then you get lost into that world. And then magic begins to happen. All right, it's 11:55. I'm usually not so disciplined with time, but I want to make a first impression, a good impression on you all. So I will bring this presentation to an end at this point and open it up for Q&A. Thank you all for your patience. I hope what I said makes sense, and I hope there is some take home for you all. So thank you all. Harish, Madhusudanji, is back to you all.
So Sunder Iyer ji, that was a wonderful presentation. We actually didn't want it to get over, so we thought we will give you, you can go over the 1 hour and give us a bit more of your insight about Om. So we thoroughly enjoyed it. I think most importantly, we experienced this session with great joy. Lots of notes I have taken personally, lots of new information I've gathered from your talk. What we will do is we will open it for Q&A. I've been sort of monitoring the chat forum. We've had quite a few, can you hear me? So we've had quite a few questions that have come through. So can you hear me, Sunder Iyer ji?
Yeah, I
so
can
I think
hear
I
you.
broke.
Yes.
There was some internet issue at my end. So we got quite a few questions that have come up through the chat forum. Okay. So I just want to pick on. We'll go through the questions, and I also have 1 or 2 questions. If time permits, I would want to get that clarified as well. So we'll go with a question from Ajit, who is asking a very relevant question here with regards to how beautifully you recited the Om. He is asking, is there a specific duration of chanting for each component of the Om?
It's a great question. And thank you for that question, Ajit ji. Ideally, you would want to space out uh, the part of it, the U part of it, and the starting part of it. Like I said, the Akara, Ukara, and Makara merges into one Om. So it's very difficult to distinguish between three parts. And in our search for the ability to equalize them, we might end up making the mistake of dissecting it too much and we lose the magic of chanting the Om. So having said that, make sure that, for example, let me give you a sample here. Sometimes we might go like this, which may not be the ideal way. Watch what happens. There is very little space for I ran out of breath because I focused too much on the O part of it. So the O, it starts with O, and just as it's merging into there is a U in between. So O. Allow this ability to balance these three beautifully into one Om. Let that happen naturally. Don't chase it and don't dissect it too much. But at the same time, remember the is as important as the O that starts with, and the U in between. As the O is converging into the all three has to be given equal duration. That is a good question. But the reason why I didn't touch upon it and I don't insist on making it equal is let it happen naturally. Just be aware, and then it'll come in naturally. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Ayerji. We have a question from Kavita from India. Kavita is asking, what are the specific numbers of Om chanting that I have to do? Is there a specific number per day that I have to do? Is there a rules there?
Kavita ji, thank you for the question. You see, this is one of the reasons why I said don't allow dogma to direct your practice sadhana. There are no fixed numbers of Om that you need to do. However, based on your time, your inclination, your interest, you can go up to 21 ohms. My wife and I, we chant 21 ohms. 21 ohms are 7 ohms into 3. And so I have a couple of videos on our channel, which is called KYG Yoga on YouTube. It comes under guided meditation, where I lead people from one Om to the other. And I do it live online. So it's not very it may not be acoustically great, but then nevertheless, it gives you an idea. So the first 3 ohms will be, for the first Om will be on Mooladhara, the second Om on the earth element, the third Om on the sense that's connected to the Mooladhara, the sense of smell. So 3 ohms take there. Then we go to Swadhisthana, 3 ohms. So the number of ohms you determine. That's why I said, talked about these methods. You can do 3 ohms, thinking of the 3 avasthas. Or you can do the 3 ohms based on Adi Bhautika, Adi Devika, Adhyatmika. So that kind of meditation. You can do 5 ohms, thinking of the 5 Pancha Mahabhutas. You can do 7 ohms, 6 chakras and the Sahasrara. You can do 21 ohms. So you determine how I want these ohms. You can do 11 ohms, 5 jnana indriya, senses of action, 5 senses of perception, 5 karma indriya, senses of action, and the mind, the 11 ohms. So you determine, okay, I want to chant these ohms based on this understanding, and playfully engage itself. I wouldn't suggest this is the number you should chant every day, and make it a dogma, because that's where I think we lose the magic of sadhana. You come up with your own idea of practicing the Om. That's what I would suggest.
Okay, thank you, Ayerji. That was wonderful. So, on a related question, we have a friend from Paresh from Leicester in England. He is asking the question: what is the time of the day that I have to recite Om, or is it before or after an activity, or it can be any time? If I'm going for a walk, can I recite Om? Is there a specific rules there, and how should I do it? That's Paresh's question from Leicester.
Thank you, Paresh. Pareshji, it's a great question. Om actually helps you get your mind into a state of mindfulness. One of the lesser benefits of Om, right, is just before beginning, you take a deep breath and you breathe out and you get set. So Om can be the beginning of any activity, not necessarily only before meditation, which is ideal because it prepares the mind, and along with the breath, the mind calms down, and then you enter into meditation. That's one side, of course. But then before any activity, you can chant the Om, not in a religious prayerful sense, not that it's bad, but I'm just saying that you don't have to even worry about the religion part of it. Any activity is good. No, I'm not sure about walking or jogging with Om chant. I haven't done that, so I cannot speak for it. Maybe it might be good, but at that point, when I'm walking on the road or jogging on the road, I want to be more Jagrat Avastha and be aware of things around me. To me, if I chant the Om or listening to Om chant might put me into an introvert state, and I might end up, tripping on a stone, or worse still, having a car honk at me, and that kind of thing. So I wouldn't really suggest you chant the Om while driving or while walking or engaging in an extrovert activity. Nevertheless, before any other activity, whether it is eating or whether it is getting ready to at work, you can chant either a mental Om or a physical Om, like a verbal chant. Now, ideal time to chant would be, like I said earlier as well, mornings is one of the best things that you can chant the Om early in the morning, the first thing in the morning. It doesn't have to be loud. You don't have to wake up the whole household. If you, of course, have a private room that you can go and practice it loudly, it's fantastic, because it really is a very good exercise for lungs. And you're able to eliminate a lot of toxins first thing in the morning in a physical level. But along with that, when you apply the mind as well, the morning time, like I said, you're not into any other commitments. So you can sustain that ability to practice at a fixed time every morning, almost every day, if not every day. So early morning is my suggestion, but some people have found evening chant as well very beneficial, because they come back home after a tired day and they want to chant Om just to bring themselves back to a normal state. So it's up to you. But I would honestly suggest, please don't get into the habit. Initially, once or twice, it may not hurt you, but don't get into the habit of chanting Om or listening to Om chants while driving or running or walking or engaging in any kind of extrovert. It might end up in a not so good situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayerji. So, when you were discussing about going inwards, there is a related question that has just come from Sudarshan in Stoke. He is asking the question: is the Sushupti state the same as non-rapid eye movement sleep, NREM sleep? Is it the same as the NREM sleep? Is what Sudarshan's question is. Um, uh, if your grace has
Thank you.
anything to ask. Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you.
Sudarshan ji. It's a good question. Um, I may not be able to medically define the NREM and compare it to Sushupti, but it is that state where you don't dream. If NREM is that state, then yes. Um, it is a state where you infer that you are there after the fact. That's there. That's the beauty. So in a sense, yes, it is NREM state, but it is more than that as well. It's a very deep state. So even when somebody is in coma, I would say that they are in a state of sushupti, um, because the I doesn't exist, unless if they're having a very different experience, out of body experience, and the NRE experience and that kind of thing. But the state where the I ceases to exist is the state of sushupti. And so NREM is perhaps the beginning of that state, but it goes a lot more than that. That is a state we get trapped in, right? Even in meditation, what happens? People nod and fall asleep because after a point, the mind doesn't know where to go, and it ends into that state of sushupti. And then you suddenly wake up and say, "Oh gosh, I didn't even know I was nodding." So that's that state. Sushupti is very, a very mystical state. It's actually a very deeply spiritual state. That's why we love it. We find it so refreshing. So yes, it does start from NREM. It goes a lot more than that. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Ayerji. So there are two related questions. One has come from Pragnesh Bhatt in Scotland, and again Kavita ji from India is also added in. But I think they are related. So, and I think you might have answered that question. The question there is, what about listening passively at work rather than actively listening? A
Very
posture
good,
in which I have to recite Om.
very good question. It is that same thing as I said earlier, while driving or running or talking or Om. Even if you're listening passively, it tends to take your mind into um, a state where your senses begin to get dulled. It's a matter of time because there's something called brain entrainment, right? It takes about 8 to 10 minutes for the brain to get entrained into a frequency. Like when you stand on a seashore and watch the waves, initially you're just caught up with people around and all of that. Eventually, when you spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so, the sound of the waves, the frequency of that sound slowly puts a different impact on the brain, right? It is the same thing. So if you want to be extrovert at work and be on your toes and be in a state where you are in your maximum productive state, which the work will be demanding, it could perhaps be against that practice. Having said that, if you practice it separately, like in the early mornings, that knowledge, that wisdom, that energy that you take from there will help you become more productive at work. So it's two different things. It's like you sleep well, you're more productive the next day. It's like that. You practice Om separately, you're able to draw that energy and bring it into work. I wouldn't suggest you listen to it while at work, because after a while you will lose track of what is going on in front of you. Believe me, I've done that. I was in IT here as well, and I've tried that, and it just wouldn't help me perform my very best at work at that point, because then I'm mixing situations here. I'm creating a different energy pattern in my mind, whereas my mind needs to be at a different pattern. Like so, um, I wouldn't suggest that you listen. Now, that's one reason. The other reason is Om is use that as the most sacred of all sounds. And I use the word sacred, not in a religious term, in the sense of give it complete respect. If I'm listening to Om and then my mind goes here and there and okay, I'm going to be typing while I'm listening to Om, then you are disrespecting that Om right away. And I mean disrespect again, quote unquote. In other words, I'm saying it's okay. Om is going in the background. It's one background sound. It's like by the way thing. And then when I take that into my practice every morning, my mind will again, my brain has been trained to treat it as one of the sounds that can come in my mind. So then it is not going to give you the effect. However, if you say Om is, I'm going to listen or chant only when I have complete focused attention. And then what happens is when you begin to give that respect and that mindfulness every time Om is chanted, then that Om begins to repay great benefits. Thank you for the question. Hopefully I made that clear.
Thank you, Ayerji. And now here is the most difficult question of all. So this is from Meena Kalakonda. How to explain chanting Om to Balavika's children?
Oh, I don't have kids, so let me put it out there. So it's very easy for me to advise how to do it, how to help kids learn the Om. I think with kids, start making it um, interesting. Don't assume that kids don't understand these things. Explain to them in the very same manner I explained to you, and you'll find them asking more deep questions. My experience with children, and I just came out of last 2 weekends, I've been talking to Bal Vikas children or Bal Vihar children, SSC in the Sai organization, and so on, where the age group is from 6 to 16. And invariably, it was 6-year-old and 9-year-olds who came up with a lot of very profound questions, though it was not on Om. My point here is, don't tell them, okay, kids won't understand all this Turiya Avastha and all that. Engage them in that. Hey, you're awake, then you are the state. The represents the state. Think of that. Now go deep in that. Give them the practical experience of the Om and make it fun and not dogmatic, and don't scare them into it and just sit straight, do this, do that. Then they begin to resist. I think if you sell that concept, they in turn will come back to us as teachers and begin to ask us questions that will put us at a spot and then make us realize, oh gosh, there is so much more to learn. So thank you for that question. I hope I did justice.
Thank you very much, Ayerji. So there is one last question from Sumati. She says, how will you chant Om on the afflictions we face? That is, Adhyatmikatab, Adi Bhautika, Adi Daivaka, when we have to also focus on epiduration of each sound. I'm just reading the text message from Sumati Sinappan.
Duration.
See, Adi Bhaudika, Adi Devika, Adhyatmika. What happens is any of these meanings, not just this Adi Bhaudika, Adi Devika, Adhyatmika, it is also about these chakras and so on. So there is this bhava, if you will, which is all of these. Then there is the meaning associated with that bhava that generates the bhava, and then there is the chanting of the Om. So when you begin the sadhana practice, you take one step at a time. It's a very good question, because what we do is we try to put all of that together. We say, okay, when I'm chanting the Om, should I think of the Om, or should I think of the chakra, or should I think of the bhava, and what is Adhyatmika? My mind is all over the place. It becomes too difficult because I'm trying too many things. So for the first few weeks, for the first few months, and if longer necessary, there's really no time for these kind of spiritual practices, right? You first say, okay, let me just focus on chanting the Om properly, and first focus on the methodology, on the mechanical aspect of chanting the Om, where the O, U, and M, all of them have equal thing. Analyze how long can I chant it. Analyze if you can chant it, and for those of you who are musically inclined, if you have a shruti that is playing, and find out which shruti is best for you to chant, whether it is F scale or G scale or whatever it is, and then begin to practice. So that is the sound part of it, the mechanical aspects of it. First practice that, get that into place. Then you begin to layer that one step then you begin to make it more and more complex. So in the short duration, I presented everything together, but nevertheless, in your practice, start with one thing and then ascribe meaning to it. Then you will be able to, now that you got the chanting in place, you'll be able to allow the mind to now focus on something that will begin to decorate the chant, if you will. It's like decorating the altar, right? First you build the basic structure of the altar, and then you start putting flowers on the altar, and then the whole altar comes alive. That is what it is. Om is a poetry. Om is a song that you're learning to sing. So first learn the mechanics, and then when you begin to practice, the whole world begins to slowly open. It requires tremendous patience, and don't put a goal and say next 45 days I'm going to do this, or just enjoy the journey and take one step at a time. And I'm sure your inner self will guide you to higher learning. But thank you for that. Very good question.
That's a very, very interactive 20 minutes of Q&A this evening. So your lecture was 55 minutes, 20 minutes of Q&A. I'm sure there are still pressing questions. So maybe we can take some of these questions outside this forum, and I could perhaps liaise through Harish and send any other questions that might come through our way. And looks like you got some exciting programs happening in the US. So some of us may be able to log in and join your course as well to get a much more comprehensive view of what you're trying to achieve there in Ohio. So on that note, I'm going to invite Ajit ji to give us a vote of thanks, please. Ajit.
Thanks, Madhu. That was a fantastic talk. And it's an honor and great pleasure as part of Sahiti and the Hindu Knowledge Academy to give the vote of thanks to Dr. Sunder Iyer. That was absolutely mesmerizing and a fantastic talk. So I would like to thank you, Dr. Iyer, for that. And I'm sure that you've managed to get your voice down to 432 hertz, as you said, because it was quite meditative for all of us, and it was a very difficult topic that you brought out in such a simplified fashion that it made perfect sense to all of us at this point of time. So I think that that's really was the beauty for me, is to understand that. And I think in the Q&A also, you brought out something which I found was really helpful, was the fact we tend to see or go to places where this OM or other things keep playing on in the background, and we were, at least I was under the impression, oh, that's a very nice thing to have. But I totally take your point that we may be negatively training our minds in that sense to leave it in the background or not trying to bring it to the foreground and utilize it in the right way. So that was a huge eye opener for me, and thank you for that. So that was a beautiful talk. I would also at this point want to thank Harish for introducing us to Dr. Iyer, and I would definitely be logging on to your YouTube channel. You said it's KYG Yoga, so we will be looking into that. So thank you very much. None of this would have been possible without the help of the organization team and Sudarshan, who has put all this together since the lockdown. One of the biggest pluses that has come out from the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdown has been that we've managed to catch up every week, and starting off with a small group within the UK, we have now spread out into the world and getting people from practically most continents joining in, and that has been fantastic. And it's great to see we had, at the peak, we had about 32 people joining in. So despite the different time zones, it's great that everybody has joined in. So big thanks to everybody who's come in. And last but not the least is Madhu. Thank you very much for being there to take us through this journey and helping us understand the nuances of all these things. So thank you very much. So this was, I felt, a beautiful sort of what we've been doing in the last few weeks of the OM, trying to understand the theory behind it. So this was a beautiful practical session that I feel would really make us understand what we've been doing. So thank you all for the beautiful session today. Thanks.
Thank you.
So before we close, can we give a round of applause to Sunder Iyer ji, please? I would request everyone to unmute and a big round of applause.
Madhu.
Sudarshan, please.
Yeah, I think what we do is in our lot of our Hindu Sangha activities, we don't clap, we say Om. So because in one sense, this will be the perfect opportunity to say, instead of clapping, we'll say Om. So that will be a good tribute to Dr. Iyer.
That's good.
So we will all
and
say Om.
Yeah, go for it. Sudarshan, you start off.
Okay. All of you say, it's just not me, all of you say, so that it will be like combined. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again, Dr. Iyer ji. It was such a delight and our privilege to have you today. So I'm sure we'll call upon you again on a regular basis, and we will liaise through Harish. Thank you very much. Okay, and thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Iyer. Thank you, Dr. Madhusan. Thank you, Dr. Sudarshan, very much. Wonderful lecture. Wonderful.